afternoon, everyone. We're so happy you could join us today. I am Ruth Brody Sharon. I'm going to be your MC for today, and not your sergeant at arms.
Unless it's needed.
Unless it's needed. So the event today is going to have several parts to it. I'm going to, in a moment, introduce you to Azim Khamisa. Many of you have met him, heard about him. We're going to show a video.
We humans have many defining moments in our lives. Sometimes these moments are joyous, and sometimes they are heartbreaking, tragic. But at these defining moments, if we are able to make the right choice, we literally manifest a miracle in us and others. My only son, Tariq, a university student, a kind, generous, a good writer, a good photographer, had aspirations to work for National Geographic, engaged to a beautiful lady, worked as a pizza delivery man on Fridays and Saturdays. He was lured to a bogus address by a youth gang. And in a gang initiation, a 14-year-old shot and killed him. The sudden, senseless death of an innocent, unarmed human being. The overwhelming grief of a family. The total confusion as you try to absorb a new, hideous reality. Needless to say, it brought my life to a crashing halt. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do is to call his mother, who lived in a different city. How do you tell a mother she's never going to see her son again, or hear him laugh, or give him a hug? I practice as a Sufi Muslim. I meditate 2 hours a day. And sometimes in deep trauma and deep tragedy, there is a spark of clarity. So what I downloaded in my meditation is that there were victims at both ends of the gun. It's easy to see that my son was a victim of the 14-year-old, a little bit complicated to see that he was a victim of American society. And that begs the question, well, who is American society? Well, it's you and me, because I don't believe that society just happenstance. I think we're all responsible for the society we've created. And children killing children is not a mark of a civil society. So 9 months after Tariq died, I started the Tariq Khamisa Foundation. And our mandate at the Tariq Khamisa Foundation is to stop kids from killing kids by breaking the cycle of youth violence. And we essentially have 3 mandates. Our first and foremost is to save lives of children. It's important to do. We lose so many on a daily basis. Our second mandate is to empower the right choices so kids don't fall through the crack and choose lives of gangs and crime and drugs and alcohols and weapons. And our third mandate is to teach the principles of nonviolence, of empathy, of compassion, of forgiveness. And I'll start with a very simple premise that violence is a learned behavior. No child was born violent. If you accept that as a truism, nonviolence can also be a learned behavior, but you have to teach it because kids are not going to learn that through osmosis. Soon after that, I reached out to my brother here with the attitude we both lost a son. My son died, he lost his grandson to the adult prison system. And I asked him to join me, and as you see, 22 years later, we're still here together. Because I can't bring Tariq back from the dead. You can't take Tony out of prison, but the one thing we can do is make sure no other young people in our community end up dead or end up in prison. With the grace of God, the Tariq Khamisa Foundation has been successful. We have a safe school model, our first, which has 4 different programs. The first one is a live assembly with Plez and me. We are introduced this man's grandson killed this man's son, and here they are together. We have in-classroom curriculum. We have after-school mentoring program, and we create a peace club. And I'm happy to share with you that besides teaching these principles of nonviolence, we are able to cut suspensions and expulsions by 70%, which is huge. Which is huge. 5 years after Tariq died, and for me to complete my journey of forgiveness, I went to see the young man who killed my son. He was 19 years old. And I remember that meeting because he's 37, still in prison, but at that first meeting, we locked eyeballs. I'm looking in his eyes, he's looking in my eyes, and I'm looking in his eyes trying to find a murder, and I didn't. I was able to climb through his eyes and touch his humanity that I got, that the spark in him was no different than the spark in me or anybody else here. So I wasn't expecting that. He was remorseful, he was articulate, he was well-mannered, and I could tell that my hand of forgiveness had changed him. So with that, please welcome my brother, Plez.
Tony is my one and only daughter's one and only child. Tony was born to my daughter, who was 15 when she gave birth to Tony. Mothering is the toughest job on the planet. There is no tougher job on the planet than raising another human being and making sure they're safe, secure, and well-positioned to be successful in life. Tony experienced a lot of violence in his life as a young kid. He saw one of his favorite cousins be murdered in the hail of automatic weapon fire and gang involvement in Los Angeles. He was very traumatized in so many different ways. Tony came to live with me. I wanted to make sure he had everything a kid needed to be successful. But on this particular evening, after years of being with me and struggling mightily to try to be successful and to live up to my expectations of being a successful person, on this one particular day, Tony ran away from home that evening. He went to be with people he thought were his friends. He was given drugs and alcohol, and he took them because he thought they would make him feel carefree. But all it did was to make his anxiety go higher and to create up a more deadly thinking on his part. He was invited to a robbery. He was given a 9mm handgun. And at the presence of an 18-year-old who commanded him and two 14-year-old boys he thought were his friends, he shot and killed Tariq Khamisa, this man's son. There are no words that can express the loss of a child. At my understanding that my grandson was responsible for the murder of this human being, I went to the prayer closet, like I was taught by my old folks, and began to pray and meditate. The one thing that Mr. Khamisa and I have in common, and we didn't know this besides being wonderful human beings, is that we both meditate. It was very helpful for me because it offered me an opportunity to seek guidance and clarity about how I wanted to be of support of this man and his family in this loss. And sure enough, my prayers were answered because I was invited to a meeting at this man's house, met his mother, his father, his wife, his brother, met their family, and had a chance to be in the presence of God-spirited people led by this man, who in the spirit of forgiveness made an opportunity for me to be of value and to share with him and to share with children the importance of understanding the need to be with a responsible adult, focus on your anger in a way that's healthy, learn to meditate. The programs that we have in Tariq Khamisa Foundation provide so many tools for the kids to put in their toolkit so they could carry them throughout their lives. It's important that our children understand that loving, caring adults care for them and support them, but it's also important that our children learn to meditate, learn to be peaceful, learn to be centered, and learn to interact with other children in a kind, empathetic, and wonderfully loving way. We need more love in our society, and that's why we're here, to share the love with children, because our children will lead the way for us, because all of us will depend on our children as we grow older and retire. They will take over this world for us, so as much love as we teach them, they will give it back to us. Blessings. Thank you.
So I was born in Kenya, was educated in England, and my brother here is a Baptist. I practice as a Sufi Muslim. He's African American, but I always tell him, I'm the African American in the group. I was born in Africa, you were not. And I'm naturally, as a citizen, I'm a first-generation citizen, and I felt that as an American citizen, I must take my share of the responsibility for the murder of my son. Why? Because it was fired by an American child. You could take the position, he killed my one and only son, he should be hung from the highest pole. How does that improve society? And I know you're probably wondering what happened to that young man. He's still in prison. He just turned 37 on September the 22nd. But I have some good news. We've been trying to get him out for 12 years. He finally will join us a year from now. And I'm very excited to have him join us because I know we've saved him, but he will save tens of thousands of students when he shares his testimony in schools that we are present on a regular basis. When he says to the kids, when I was 11, I joined a gang. When I was 14, I murdered Mr. Khamisa's son. I've spent the last umpteen years in prison. I'm here to tell you it's not worth it. Do you think the kids will listen to that voice? Yes, because his intonations will be of a person that pulled the trigger, and I know that he wants to turn the clock back. Of course, that's not possible. I wish it was. I would have my son back. My brother would have his grandson back. So I think that demonstrates the power of forgiveness. So what's the big takeaway here? So I want to end our session with this quote, which is the basis of my fourth book, which incidentally, the foreword for that book was written by Tony. So it goes like this: sustained goodwill creates friendship. You don't make friends by bombing them, right? You make friends by extending goodwill. That ought to be obvious. So sustained goodwill creates friendship. Sustained friendship creates trust. Sustained trust creates empathy. Sustained empathy creates compassion. And sustained compassion creates peace. I call this my peace formula. Starts with goodwill, friendship, trust, empathy, compassion, and peace. But people ask me, how do you extend goodwill to the person who murdered your child? I tell them, you do that through forgiveness. As it's evident it worked for me, it worked for my family. What's a miracle is it worked for Tony, it worked for his family. It can work for you and your family. For Israel and Palestine, North and South Korea, for Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, and Syria. It can work for the United States of America. So let me leave you with this, my sisters, and a couple of brothers, that peace is possible. How do I know that? Because I am at peace. Thank you very much. Namaste.
You've met Azim and Tony's grandfather. In a moment, you're going to, can you hear me? Yeah. Yes. And in a moment, you're going to meet Tony as well. Many of the things that I wanted to share with you about Azim, you've heard in the video, so there is one thing I'd like to share about him right now before I bring him up to start the program. He has received over 80 local, national, and international awards, including the National Crime Victims Special Community Service Award, presented by President Clinton, and Attorney General Janet Reno. That was in 1997. In 2002, he received Search for Common Ground prestigious award alongside of Desmond Tutu and Ted Koppel. In 2004, he participated in the Synthesis Dialogues with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which was hosted by Pope John Paul at his summer palace in Castel Gandolfo, Italy. And in 2006, he was given the Spirit of Crazy Horse Award from the Reclaiming Youth Network, alongside Muhammad Ali. In addition, Azim has been the recipient of the California Peace Prize in 2003 and the Pepsi Freedom Heroes Award in 2006, among many other awards. So it is with honor and delight and privilege that I bring to all of you Azim Khamisa. The poet of forgiveness.
Greetings, good afternoon, namaste, shalom, assalamu alaikum. Anyways, thank you for being here, and I want to acknowledge my good friend Tadi. I've known her for many years. I know she's a big star in Los Angeles and a big supporter of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And I actually am on the board and the vice chair of IONS. And when I first joined, Bob Blackstone, which was Tadi's brother, was given the job to vet me out before they invited me onto the board. So he's passed on. May the good Lord rest his soul in peace. And thank you, Ruth. And we were all together at the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago not so long ago, talking about how to create more peace in the world. So today's presentation, and I'm also very pleased to share the stage with Tony. He's out finally after in the video we said he would join us. He was 37 then, and at 38 actually it took more like 39 for him to join us. So you're going to hear from him, which is a real treat because we speak together mostly to students. Last Friday we were speaking at a school in San Diego where the foundation is based, and we did 3 assemblies with about 600 kids. But we don't often speak to groups like this, so this is a true treat for all of you. So being Sunday, and being the conversations about peace, I thought I might open the afternoon with a prayer. So I'll say it in Arabic first, and then translate. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam wa alayka jawf salam. Hina Rabbana bi salam, Wadkilna dare salam. In the name of Allah, the most merciful and the most beneficent. O Allah, O our Lord, Thou art the peace, from Thee is the peace, and to Thee returneth the peace. O Allah, O our Lord, give us a life of peace and usher us into the abode of peace. You know, we all want peace, but it is complicated in the world that seems to increasingly become more violent. And even so recently, we've seen that accelerate in what happened in the Middle East and what's happening in the war between Russia and Ukraine. And there are many other skirmishes and wars around the world. And sometimes we feel very helpless and say, what can one individual do very much about it? But yet I'm sure you know the quote by Margaret Mead, that a few concerned, caring citizens can actually change the world. So that's my hope.
We don't need many more people. We have all of us in the room right here. And I know under the leadership of Tadi and Ruth and many of you, because you're all leaders and doing amazing work in the Los Angeles community. And we cannot sit back. Doesn't feel right to me. We all have to proactively increase the volume of our voice. And I've been scratching my head a lot in the last few years, I would say at least in the last 2.5, 3 years, as what is it that we can do more? I started a foundation 29 years ago, and many of you know the story, and you saw the TED Talk that Tony's grandfather and I did at TED Women in New Orleans. And yes, TKF is in its 29th year. Last Sunday, which was the 21st of January, was actually the 29th anniversary of this tragedy that spawned the Tariq Khamisa Foundation. And in these 29 years, the foundation has reached over 2 million kids worldwide. And with the grace of God, I was sharing at the lunch table that we continue to double. We've doubled a year ago. This school year, we've doubled again. We'll reach over 20,000 kids. And the demand for the Tariq Khamisa Foundation Safe School model is overwhelming. We have so many schools waiting for it. And always as a non-profit, we have to balance resources with the work we do. And we don't have enough people. The staff today is about 22 people. Both the grandfather, I, and Tony have been volunteering. But we are continuously trying to figure out how to, get more resources so we can hire more people. Because needless to say, the need for the work we are doing is huge. So the Safe School model, just to give you a little synopsis of it, has 4 programs for youth. We focus essentially from 4th grade to 10th grade. Because a lot of kids join gangs, like Tony joined gang in the 6th grade. And as you know, that at 14 he was in 8th grade when this tragedy was perpetrated. So very difficult years, those adolescence years. So we've decided to stay in that space, and we have stayed in that space for the last 29 years. Because we lose a young soul every hour in the United States. It breaks my heart every time I hear that, and you hear that a lot. And you think, this doesn't happen in other first world countries. And we are the richest nation in the world. What's wrong with that picture? It's not about money. We have plenty of money. And we often do exactly what we want to do. We can spend billions and trillions on wars on foreign soil, or conquering outer space. Yet every single day, our defenseless children are being wiped out in a frenzy of bizarre violence. This is children. Sandy Hook. 6th and 7th graders were mowed down in automatic gunfire. They had a lot of living to do. Uvalde, 19 years old. And you know, I didn't realize all of these horrific statistics till the time I lost Tariq. Of course, I'm an expert on this work now. And as you heard me say on the video, that I started with a very simple premise that violence is a learned behavior. Yeah? Tony was not born violent. No child is born violent. And you're going to hear from him about his story. And where do our children learn violence from? From us adults. Yeah? So we have a responsibility here as adults, an apology to our kids, because we really haven't done a very good job in being good role models. And that was the premise that I started, that as an American citizen, and I emigrated to the United States exactly 50 years ago, in 1974. And I love my country. I'm sure all of you do. There's a lot of opportunity here if you're willing to work hard. And I think if you open the gates, the whole world would move into the States. There's a lot of good here. If you travel overseas, I'm sure most of you have, what do you see? Starbucks, KFC, American movies, American music, SUVs, yeah? And that's probably good that we are exporting our meritocratic, free market, democratic values, although that could be challenged right now, but it's a different conversation, democratic values to the rest of the world. And that's a good thing, because what happens in the United States eventually does happen in the world, because as the richest superpower in the world, we have a tremendous amount of impact on the culture of our planet. But unfortunately, we are also exporting our violence. We're seeing more violence as a result of the violence in our own country. So when it comes to violence, I'm sad to say that we are very poor role models. Now, with the grace of the universe, the foundation continues to grow. So the Safe School model initially started with a live assembly with Tony's grandfather, Place, you met him on the video, and myself. And our first program was at Bernie Elementary, which is Tony's alma mater. So I started the foundation 9 months after Tariq died. So we are essentially in our 29th year as well. And I got a call from, I actually remember her name, from Carol Roblaskas. I started the foundation in October of 95. She called us in 96. They said, most of these kids know Tony, because that was his alma mater. And they keep asking me questions, because Tony was the first 14-year-old to be tried as an adult. Because we lowered the age from 16 to 14 on January 1st, and this happened 3 weeks later. A lot of media, it was TV, newspaper. So the kids are very confused. I can't answer this question, so would you please come talk to the kids? So we saw this as a cry for help. We were still figuring out, how do you stop this? So I have a very talented friend of mine who is married to my best friend, Dan, Kit Goldman. She is a founder of 2 legitimate theaters, and a brilliant writer and a photographer like Ruth and my friend Barbara Heller over there. You probably should meet her. So Kit decided to create essentially our first assembly. And there were 750 kids at Bernie Elementary. So we broke them up into 250 each because we knew there were going to be a lot of questions. So we did 3 assemblies. And she emceed, and then I spoke, and Ples spoke. And amazing pin drop silence in the audience. Kids were super attentive. They asked a lot of questions. The next day, the principal called me and said, Azim, the kids were so moved with your assembly, they've written you letters. Well, I said, oh, great. I really would love to read those letters and see what the kids have to say. So the next morning I went to the school. She gave me 375 letters.
Whoa.
Can you believe it? I thought I might get a dozen, you know? And this was essentially middle school kids, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, 12, 13, 14 years old. And some came with crayons and drawings. And I still have one on my wall that says, the ultimate expression of love is forgiveness, written by a 7th grader. So that was very exciting, because that confirmed to me that not only are these concepts teachable, our kids are hungry for them. Yeah? Because they don't see many examples like this. Mostly what they see in our culture is that violence begets more violence. Well, we break that mold. And then we decided, okay, we're getting very good results with the assembly. We stayed there for several years. But what we noticed that, yes, the assembly is very powerful, but it changes attitudes and not behavior. Because one program can't change behavior. But it does change attitudes, which is great because it starts there, right? By being aware that nonviolence is a good solution. So then we started to bring our second program, which is a 10-week curriculum, which is very experiential. And we teach essentially 6 principles through this curriculum. Yeah? And it's weaved into several lessons that teach, accountability, responsibility, empathy, compassion, forgiveness, peace building, peacemaking, and nonviolence leadership. And we now have 3 levels of it. So the first level is 4th, 5th, and 6th. The second is 7th and 8th, and third is 9th and 10th. So there are age specific and grade specific. So to give you an example, every lesson is experiential and has a theme. So one of the examples we teach, I pick an example that we teach empathy. And the theme is, you don't know me till you walk a mile in my shoes, and I don't know you till I walk a mile in your shoes. If you walk a mile in my shoes, you get to know me. If I walk a mile in your shoes, I get to know you, right? You can't have empathy for somebody you don't know. I met Tony when he was 19. So I've been in his life for the last 24 years, know everything about him, yeah? And you'll hear about his life. So after we teach the lesson, the homework is, go walk a mile in somebody's shoes you don't know. So the next lesson after empathy is compassion, because I always say the precursor of forgiveness is compassion, the precursor of compassion is empathy, and the precursor of empathy is to know everything there is to know about that person. Yeah? So the next lesson is compassion with the teacher, which happened to be my daughter, who is the executive director of the Tariq Khamisa Foundation. Very proud of her. She's done a great job in leading the foundation. She started with me in '98, 3 years after Tariq died, and then she left 6 years later to start her family. She's given me 3 gorgeous grandchildren. I know you're dying to see that photo. I have it right here. And then she came back 8 years ago when my youngest one started to go to school. So she was teaching this class on empathy, and then there was this one kid in the class, a Hispanic kid. His name is Alejandro, but he goes by Alex. The most disruptive kid in the class, right? You could tell right on his behavior, he's a wannabe gang member, right? The signs and the behavior. So when she asked who wants to share their homework on empathy, Alex's hand shot up, right? And she was trying to avoid him because he's the most disruptive kid in the class. She's thinking, well, he's going to ruin my class. But there was no way to avoid him. He was so animated. He wanted to speak. So she finally invited him to say, okay, Alex, what is it that you want to share? Here's what he shared. He said, last weekend I was walking in the hood, and this kid gave me a dirty, angry look. And the rules in the hood are, if a kid, it's a rival gang, gives you a dirty, angry look, you go beat him up. But because you taught me that you don't know me till you walk a mile in my shoes, and I don't know you till I walk a mile in yours. So I walked up to this kid and says, why are you giving me a dirty, angry look? Well, the kid told me, well, I'm not giving you a dirty, angry look. I'm angry because my brother was shot and killed right in this spot last night. So what did you do, Alex? I reached out to him. I told him, you know what, I really know how you feel, because I lost my favorite uncle in this spot 6 months ago. That's empathy. Tell me you can't teach this stuff. And Alex walks the hood, not just last weekend, every weekend. What does he do? When he sees another kid give him a dirty, angry look, he reaches out. Yeah? Although this age is difficult, but they are very impressionable. They are very teachable. And they're looking for these new tools to be able to move forward. I can tell you stories after stories after stories, yeah? Because it's 29th year. So now we are seeing that the curriculum is very effective. We are beginning to change behavior, yeah? Like you just saw in the example I gave you. But then we thought, we need to do more, because we need to spawn non-violent leaders that are committed to peace building. So we create a peace club on campus. The first 2 programs go during school hours. The peace club can go after school or during lunch or during PE. The school makes the decision. It's actually a leadership program. We have about 60 different titles. But what does it take to become a leader? Not only to become a leader, but to become a non-violent leader committed to peacemaking and peace building. Yeah? And that has been a very good program. But when you look at an inner city school, which is about 1,000 kids, many of them are on that slippery slope, like Tony was. And this is quite a large number. And science tells us it could be anywhere from 8 to 12%. 1,000 is a lot of kids in one school. So we needed to do more for it. So our fourth program is a mentoring program. We spent 60 hours to train our mentors, and many of them are kids that have come from inner city environment. I remember the story about Rocio. She's moved on. She's now actually a director at another nonprofit. But we met her when she was in 7th grade. On her way home from school, which was only 4 blocks away. And the initiation ritual was whoever crosses the street next, you gotta go beat her up. And that happened to be Rocio. And they mauled her, pulled her hair. And fortunately, there was an adult there that came to the rescue and she ran home. A week later, we were there at her school with the assembly, Pleasant and I. And she was so moved with our story, she forgave the gang members that mauled her. She went through high school, she went to Berkeley University, got a degree in social work, and came and worked for the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, and was one of our top mentors, and then also became a supervisor. Yeah. So the mentoring program, and science actually validates that it actually works. So when a school, when a child misbehaves or shows tendency that he has to go to be suspended or expelled, that's the way we work. Our system is very punitive, right? The world we live in is very eye for an eye. Well, the work that TKF does is in the restorative umbrella. There's a lot about restorative justice, and if you have time, we can talk more about that. And that's the hardest part I see, is to shift, especially the faculty. The kids actually are easier than the faculty. Is to move them from that punitive mindset to a restorative mindset. If you expel a kid or suspend a kid, he's no longer in school. Where does he end up in? Yeah? You've heard about this, right? School to prison pipeline. Yeah? Where we don't believe in expulsion and suspension. So when a kid misbehaves, the teacher is now told, send him to one of our mentors. We have a room at the school. And our mentors will work with that kid, not only in school, but in their homes and in their community. And they bond. I can tell you a few stories there, that how powerful this mentoring program can be. So when you take these 4 programs together, they are super effective. Because now we're not only changing attitudes, but we are changing behavior. We're giving them a new trajectory and a new style. I was sharing at the conference lunchtime that I spoke at San Diego State a few years ago, and this kid came up to me and said, you know, Mr. Khamisa, you've changed my life. And I said, well, tell me more. He said, well, when I was in 7th grade, you came and spoke to my school. I've just graduated in a degree in finance at San Diego State University, and I have a job at Wells Fargo Bank. And I wouldn't be here if I hadn't met you in 7th grade, because I know I work in the field of finance and international finance. When my son was alive, I don't do much of that anymore, but he was a successful international investment banker. He says, I knew that you were a banker. So after I met you in 7th grade, I decided to make you my role model and not follow my older brother, my father, and my grandfather, who were all gang involved. his kids will not be gang involved. Yeah? We break that cycle. So, the work that we've been doing we've had a lot of acknowledgement, as Ruth shared with you. And a few years ago, we got a call from UC Berkeley that they were trying to create a program for parents on restorative principles so that this could continue. We can teach it in school, but then when you go home, we want to make sure that parents can also reinforce those restorative principles. So we now have a program that we partnered with UC Berkeley for parents that essentially, again, help them move from a punitive mindset to a restorative mindset. And during the pandemic, we've created a program for teachers. Because I'm sure you know this, teachers are probably as traumatized as the kids are. You know? And we have a second site in Pennsylvania, which we started, I believe, 6 years ago, and Tony actually travels there with my daughter and our programs person to do some training, because we provide direct services in San Diego County. And then when we go outside of San Diego County, we become a training institute. So we train the actual schools, because obviously it would take millions of staff members to hit every school in our country, right? So we're hoping that our training institute will now grow and they can take the Safe School model, which is now fully baked, inshallah. We've done the work, we've tested it, all the colleges have evaluated, it works, it's evidence-based, everything you'd want the program to be, and the demand is overwhelming. So this is our hope, that as we grow, Tony has just joined the Tariq Khamisa Foundation board. He's on our board. And hopefully these young people are going to continue to move the foundation forward with my daughter and the staff. All right, so I'm going to share one small piece, and I'm going to bring Tony up here. Then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So, I meditate a lot, and my first book was From Murder to Forgiveness. My second book was a sequel, From Forgiveness to Fulfillment, because the work that I've done in the aftermath of my son's tragedy has been very fulfilling, and I've personally given assemblies to over 1 million kids, over 1,000 assemblies in the 29 years. And then I thought someday I might write a book, From Fulfillment to Enlightenment. Well, I didn't quite make enlightenment here. I don't want to be, full disclosure here, right? But on the way to enlightenment, I found peace. And you heard me talk about that on the radio. So my third book was From Fulfillment to Peace. And I thought, and Tony, as I said in the video, wrote the foreword to the book, which we have here, and did a great job. So it's a 25 plus year journey that started very dark with murder and ended in peace. So I thought to myself, you know what? There's 8 billion people in the world. If 1 billion people practice forgiveness, then the default outcome would be world peace. That's very exciting. Because with the internet, you can reach 1 billion people. Well, I didn't have the bandwidth when I had this download, which was probably about 10 years ago. So about 2.5 years ago, I was speaking at a personal development seminar that supports the foundation. This young lady came up to me afterwards and says, Azim, ever since I was a young girl, I've always wanted to be involved with world peace. And I said, you do? I have a project for you. So let's talk offline. And 2.5 years we've been working on figuring out how to promote world peace through forgiveness. There are many, many organizations that are working towards world peace. I'm sure you've probably heard of many. Ruth just told me about world peace by 2030, right? The United Nations being the largest one. And I've spoken at the General Assembly there and search for common ground that looks for conflict resolution, and they're doing amazing work. But a lot of the effort that is targeting world peace is based on conflict resolution. I'm suggesting that we try and add forgiveness to it. Because forgiveness is what helped me get to peace. Yeah? So if you can get, and then I've met this guy who is one of the top AI guys recently. They said to me, you don't need to get to 1 billion people. He says, all movement, the science tells us that the tipping point is 4%. Well, 4% of 8 billion people is 320 million people. It's even more easier. 4% of the population of the United States is 12 million people. Although I think we might do better outside of the United States than in the US. We'll eventually have to come back here. So we've been studying the strategy of how to launch this program. The website is in preparation. I have 6 volunteers, and Diane McKay is one of our great volunteers that keeps the Peace Through Forgiveness is our website. Is not up yet, but it will be on March 6th coming up in a couple of months. Is my son's 50th birthday. He died at 20, which was 30 years ago. So we're going to launch this idea about trying to get people like yourselves to help us get to that 420 million people. So I don't care who gets the credit for it, as long as we get world peace. Yeah? So I'm doing nothing. Yeah? So we can all do something. So join us, support us, and become ambassadors for us. Bring forgiveness in your own lives. Which I know if you know Tadi and Ruth, they're all pretty enlightened people. So please put your names down, talk to Diane, and there's a sign-up sheet. And we've identified 150 different organizations. Over the 2.5 years, we worked with 6 university teams, 3 in London and 3 over here in Toronto, that helped to strategize all the ideas of how we, because most of the movements start with this idea of 4%. George Floyd started, Black Lives Matter. MLK started the civil rights movement. Gandhi, got India freed from the British Raj, who owned 3/4 of the world without firing a shot. Nelson Mandela, very similar story, And Desmond Tutu, who I personally, we got an award together. And he's written several books, my story is in it. So there's plenty of people at it, but I don't think they're working in concert. So our goal as we move forward is to now, I know it's a moonshot, but I figured if Elon Musk can do it, so can I, right? Thank you. All right, so let me bring Tony on stage, and then we'll open up for Q&A. Just to tell you a little bit about Tony, I met him when he was 19, stage in his life. And finally, in 2019, when he was 39, he was in front of the parole board. He'll tell you his own story. And I was there, my daughter was there, advocating for his release. Ples was there, his grandfather, we were there to support him. And even the commissioner was in tears because he said, I've been doing this work for 25 plus years. I never had the victim's father and the victim's sister advocate for the offender's release. And I said, no. Tony's not the same person he was when he was 14. He has work to do. and his work to do is not behind bars, but outside of the bars, working for the foundation. Because I know that we say Tony, but he's saving a lot of kids by volunteering for the foundation. And I think that's more important, because I know that Tony will continue to save more and more and more and more kids. So come on up, Tony.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tony. I'm gonna ask everyone to bear with me because I'm not a public speaker, but I am asked to speak in public from time to time. You heard a little bit of my story, both from Azim and watching the video of the TED Talk of Azim and my grandfather. I watched that TED Talk before also. It's a great TED Talk. My story starts before my tragic encounter with Tariq. I was born to a teenage mother. I was raised in South Central Los Angeles. At that time, it was a high gang territory. All of my immediate family were enmeshed in gang culture. My uncles, my aunties, all my cousins that I looked up to at the time. So much so that I thought in my young mind that that was the journey that was expected of me also. My mother, in her young wisdom, made a plan to send me to live with her father, my grandfather in San Diego. That was a difficult decision for her, I'm sure, but at the time, I didn't see the wisdom in it. As a young man, I only saw that I had one more person in my life who was trying to get rid of me. I didn't have a relationship with my father. I didn't feel connected with the family that I had, and I thought that my mother was sending me off to be someone else's burden. So that added to a lot of the anxiety and the anger that I had already built in my life. Seeing family members murdered through gang violence, dealing with abuse at my young age, and now abandonment by the people that I knew and loved most. My grandfather, to his credit, is a great individual and showed me, or tried to show me, the best parts of himself in hopes of giving me something to aspire to. He loved me in the best way that he could. He was very strict and very stern, something that I wasn't used to at the time, and I took that in the wrong way. And I did not trust the love that he provided me. So after years of living with him and trying to make the adjustments necessary, I finally decided to run away from home. And on the day that I ran away from home, I connected with friends of mine at the time who were all gang members, all young people who were struggling with their own emotional issues and their own trauma. We got together and a decision was made to rob a pizza man. When that decision was made, myself and another young man were told to go out and find a bogus address to send the pizza man to. We did that, and when he arrived, we laid in wait for him, and I was given a gun, and we committed to rob him. And while I was attempting to rob him, I was told to shoot him by the 18-year-old in the crowd, in the group, and I shot and killed Tariq. After that, I was caught shortly after that, 4 days later. And I was sentenced ultimately to 25 years to life. I was tried as an adult. I spent a year in California Youth Authority, this prison for little kids, basically. And then I went to New Folsom State Prison. I was 16 when I landed on New Folsom State Prison's main line, and I struggled mightily to to deal with the adjustments of being a young person and asked to now be an adult in an adult environment and figure it out. My grandfather, again, to his credit, stuck it out with me from my incarceration and ultimately all the way to my freedom. He had spoke to me while I was going through my trial, while I was going through the court process for murdering Tariq, and he had informed me that Azim had forgiven me for my actions. He also told me that Azim wanted to meet me one day, and I knew at 14 that I wasn't ready for that encounter. It wasn't something that I felt like I was up to, nor was it something that I felt like I deserved, the forgiveness for taking someone's life. It took until, as Azim says, until I was 19 and I was in New Folsom State Prison, and I had decided to finally sit with Azim because I knew deep down, even if I wasn't ready to, I needed to, and if I could, provide Azim and his family some sort of closure for my role in the murder of his son. So my grandfather scheduled it. Azim got on my visiting list and he came to see me. We sat in Folsom's visiting room for around 6 hours, just talking to one another. It was one of the more difficult conversations that I ever had to have. He asked me to tell him about the night that I murdered his son. And I sat there and I recounted the story to him as best as I could. And at the end of the story, he told me that he had forgiven me for what I had done. He saw victims on both sides of the gun, and that when I came home, he had a job for me waiting at the foundation. At that time, I didn't feel like I was ever coming home. I was actually being told that I would never come home. Because in California at that time, if you had a life sentence, you was expected to spend the rest of your life in prison. Azim's and his family's forgiveness gave me the space and myself to begin to do the work that I needed to do to become the person that I am today. It was an extremely long journey for me, extremely long. I can speak all day about the length of this journey because working on yourself is hard enough, but working on yourself in an environment where you're not meant to change it feels impossible. So even when I took steps forward, it always felt like I was taking more steps backwards and ended up further from where I was than when I started off. But through the support of my grandfather and Azim and Tariq, in 2019, after a 7.5-hour parole board hearing where they all sat with me in silence for the most part and supported me through that process, I was granted parole. After being paroled from prison, I began to work with the foundation, doing volunteer work and speaking to kids. I still speak to young people. We still go into schools. Azim and I just did 3 assemblies at Albert Einstein's middle school in San Diego. It's my pleasure, as well as I'm extraordinarily grateful to have the opportunity to speak to people, to speak to young people, and tell them my story in the hopes that they can connect with or find something in that helps them in some way. I tell them all the time at the end of my portion of the talk that I would like to leave them with the knowledge that your choices don't have to define you. Ultimately, you define you. And sometimes it takes a little longer, but you just have to work at it. What I'd like to leave you guys with is the forgiveness portion of it. Because I don't spend enough time speaking about that, I feel. When I speak with young people, it's a very big topic. It's broad, it's very woo-woo a little bit, where you can't really make the connections. But it's because of Azim's forgiveness that I'm here today. It's because of Azim's forgiveness that I am the person that I am today. Of course, I had to put the work in and make the changes that was necessary for myself. But if Azim maintained an eye for an eye mentality, then that becomes my sounding board, because it was already something that I was familiar with. So if an eye for an eye is what was aspired to, then it's all I would have ever aspired to. But because I saw somebody who had the grace to forgive me for something that was horrible, I began forgiving the people in my life that hurt me. The people that abused me, the people that I felt left me, the people that I felt that traumatized me. And if I could make those connections in my own life, then I hope other people can make them also. Thank you.
Oh, let's give him some more love, huh? Legally, he spent almost 25 years in prison. You know, he's better at technology than I am. I asked him about, how do I do this on the iPhone, I'm very proud of Tony.